why are gargoyles and creatures of the night so often in cathedrals?
Realism is simply romanticism that has lost its reason. Chesterton's basically in an IG saying, yes, Slay Queen, you're still beautiful.
Cracker Barrel just bridging the divide of everyone in our nation. Welcome everyone to the Tutor Ramble podcast. My name is Richard.
My name is Austin.
Today, we're doing another little Chesterton essay today on Gargoyles by G.K. Chesterton. This one's actually a pretty short one, so we're actually going to read it live for you all to listen to, so you don't have to go do homework and go read something and come back. We're going to read it, discuss it part by part. I found this very interesting. I was the one that requested that we do a video on this one because a personal interest of mine is my hatred of modern art. And this goes into 3 stages of art, according to G.K. Chesterton, ending with realism or modern art. So we're going to go into it, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, this essay is one of Chesterton's many. We actually bought a book called In Defense of Sanity, or it's a collection of essays that you can get online. We'll put it in the description if anybody wants to check it out. Has a bunch of his essays, and we'll be going through them occasionally every now and then, throw a Chesterton essay breakdown out there. Mm-hmm. Sorry about my raspy voice. I'm going to try to clear that out, but maybe you do the first reading.
I'll do the first reading.
I'll clear my voice.
Get your pipes a little lubricated.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, gargoyle. Okay, I'm ready. Now, so we're just going to talk a little bit part by part. You're going to read it off. We'll discuss and go from there. Let's do it.
All right. The introduction and part 1.
Yes.
On Gargoyles. This was written in 1910. So, alone at some distance from the wasting walls of a disused abbey, I found half sunken in the grass the gray and goggled-eyed visage of one of those graven monsters that made the ornamental waterspouts in the cathedrals of the Middle Ages. It lay there, scoured by ancient rains, or stripped by recent fungus, but still looking like the head of some huge dragon slain by a primeval hero. And as I looked at it, I thought of the meaning of the grotesque, and passed into some symbolic reverie of the 3 great stages of art.
So it's introduced like that, and Chesterton's talking about how he came upon a gargoyle.
Yeah.
And he started to, in this story.
Well, reading this, what really got my attention here is the meaning of the grotesque. And I just never really thought too much to think about of like what was the purpose of architecture and art mixed with the grotesque, like gargoyles. The fact that that was such a significant part of architecture across Europe, and then just not anymore. Why is that? So that's what initially intrigued me. But to go on to part 1, the one where we can actually discuss.
All right.
Once upon a time, there lived upon an island a merry and innocent people, mostly shepherds and tillers of the earth. They were republicans. Like all primitive and simple souls, they talked over their affairs under a tree, and the nearest approach they had to a personal ruler was a sort of priest or white witch who said their prayers for them. They worshipped the sun, not idiotroskally. I'm going to get that wrong. Idolatrously, but as the golden crown of the god whom all such infants see almost as plainly as the sun. Now this priest was told by his people to build a great tower, pointing to the sky in salutation of the sun god, and he pondered long and heavily before he picked his materials, for he was resolved to use nothing that was not almost as clear and exquisite as sunshine itself. He would use nothing that was not washed as white as the rain that can wash the heavens, nothing that did not sparkle as spotlessly as that crown of God. He would have had nothing grotesque or obscure. He would not have even anything emphatic or anything mysterious. He would have all the arches as light as laughter, as candid as logic. He built the temple in 3 concentric courts, which were cooler and more exquisite in substance each than the other. For the outer wall was a hedge of white lilies ranked so thick that a green stalk was hardly to be seen. And the wall within, that was of crystal, which smashed the sun into 1,000,000 stars. And the wall within that, which was the tower itself, was a tower of pure water, forced up into an everlasting fountain, and upon the very tip and crest of that forming spire was one big and blazing diamond, which the water tossed up eternally and caught again, as the child catches a ball. Now, said the priest, I have made a tower, which is a little worthy of the sun.
So in that first part, because he's breaking down the 3 stages of art,
Yep.
according to Chesterton here, and he's making a bit of a metaphor. This first part, he's talking about the classic architecture and think Greek, ancient Egypt, that kind of architecture that would shine like the sun, the brightness, the diamond-like.
The idea of trying to emulate or try to reach and be similar to that of the divine, something perfection, reaching toward the ideas of perfection. And so worshipping the sun, trying to find something that is just as bright, just as sparkling, just as pure and white as,
the heavens, essentially, that look up
heavens.
to the skies, and the
Yes.
brighter the closer you are to the heavens. I think that classic kind of architecture, and he's describing that before he gets into then his. Do you want to discuss it a little bit more? Go through the essay more so quickly, and then discuss afterwards.
I mean, I just do find it funny of just, I love the sentence of, they were shepherds of the earth. They were Republicans. Like all primitive and simple souls, they talked over their affairs under a tree. I just find that funny. It's a funny line.
Like all primitive and simple souls, they talked over their affairs under a tree and nearest approach. Yeah.
The simplicity of the idea of governance of just, let's just all talk and get along with each other, the idealistic time. So I find that an interesting setup. But yeah, no, this being I think it'd be best to continue on, but overall, Chesterton does allow he does not dislike, I guess, the first stage of art or the second. It's the third he seems to have more of a contention with.
Yes.
According to the metaphor.
Want to get into that second one?
Yes.
Yes. Do you want me to go or you continue?
You can go ahead if you want.
Let's see if that voice cleared up a little bit. Okay, here we go. This is the second stage of art and the second part in his essay here. But about this time, the island was caught in a swarm of pirates, and the shepherds had to return themselves into rude warriors and seamen. And at first, they were utterly broken down in blood and shame, and the pirates might have taken the jewel flung up forever from their sacred fount. And then, after years of horror and humiliation, they gained a little and began to conquer because they did not mind defeat. And the pride of the pirates went sick within them after a few unexpected foils. And at last, the invasion rolled back into the empty seas, and the island was delivered. And for some reason, after this, men began to talk quite differently about the temple and the sun. Some, indeed, said, "You must not touch the temple. It is classical. It is perfect, since it admits no imperfections." But the others answered, "In that it differs from the sun. That shines on the evil and the good, and on mud and monsters everywhere. The temple is of the noon. It is made of white marble, clouds, and sapphire sky, but the sun is not always of the noon. The sun dies daily. Every night he is crucified in blood and fire." Now the priest had taught and fought through all the war, and his hair had grown white, but his eyes had grown young, and he said, "I was wrong, and they were right. The sun, the symbol of our Father, gives life to those earthly things that are full of ugliness and energy. All the exaggerations are right if they exaggerate the right thing. Let us point to heaven with tusks and horns and fins and trunks and tails, so long as they all point to heaven. The ugly animals praise God as much as the beautiful. The frog's eyes stand out of his head because he is staring at heaven. The giraffe's neck is long because he is stretching towards heaven. The donkey has ears to hear. Let him hear." And under the new inspiration, they planned a gorgeous cathedral in the Gothic manner, with all the animals of the earth crawling over it and all the possible ugly things making up one common beauty because they all appealed to the god. The columns of the temple were carved like the necks of giraffes. The dome was like an ugly tortoise, and the highest pinnacle was a monkey standing on its head with its tail pointing at the sun. And yet the whole was beautiful because it was lifted up in one living and religious gesture as a man lifts his hands in prayer.
This is where it does get interesting for me of the idea of why the Gothic is still appealing. Why are gargoyles and creatures of the night so often in cathedrals and different religious iconography? Of the idea that just that line alone of that the ugly animals praise God as much as the beautiful, and that every exaggeration, all the exaggerations are right if they exaggerate the right thing. I appreciate the mirror of each other, of one are trying to be like the divine, trying to be like the perfect. And the second, after experiencing tragedy, going, no, there's still, it is not denial of perfection, but realizing that we ourselves aren't. And more saying like, hey, just because we aren't perfect doesn't mean we can't aspire to the perfect. I appreciate how much like they are two sides of the same coin, even if they are looking at like almost completely opposite ideas. They're at least aesthetically very opposite.
Yeah, I never really thought too hard about why the Gothic movement was around. There's so many artistic and art history that you could look into. Obviously, this is breaking it down into that more metaphor, philosophical way of looking at it, because with the Gothic architecture, essentially what Chesterton's saying here for the first part and the second part of the classical and now the Gothic, both had this purpose of reaching to something higher. When he looks at this beauty, it's in this case, where the classical in the first stage of art, it was trying to be shiny, perfect, being like the heavens, reaching to the heavens. In the second stage of art, it's understanding, as the priest was talking with the other people in this example, it's understanding that, well, even the ugly things were made in God's image. Why can't the ugly animals and the frogs with eyes in each side of their head also be just as beautiful in their exaggerated sense?
Yeah.
Isn't that also worth noting? And I don't know if it says it in the next section, but I believe it does. It's basically the donkey can lead the way. Why can't the donkey lead the way? Why does it have to be, he doesn't even say this, but why does it have to be the beautiful horse? Donkeys are just as much, just as much of nature as
the idea between
else.
The unicorn and the donkey is like, why can't the donkey also lead the way?
Yeah.
And I find that a beautiful idea, especially just comparing the ideas of a Gothic cathedral and the first thing that pops in my head of more classical architecture of like the Parthenon being supposedly trying to be an image of what the pantheon of gods would live in, what they would actually, where they would actually be, trying to give the imagery of the gods and what it would look like. And Gothic architecture very much feels, to me at least, more rooted on the earth. There's something beautiful about both, but when I look at classic architecture, I feel like, oh, this is trying to get me to see what perfection, divinity would be like. And the Gothic is far, I feel, more grounded. It can be majestic, but it's earthly tide of acknowledging that it isn't perfect and its extreme exaggerations,
right,
but still equally beautiful. I love that both have that place. So, but I never really thought of it the way Chesterton put.
I did not either. Yeah, this put a different image in my mind of like, now I can refer to you as Gothic architecture, and it's me calling you beautiful in your own way.
I'm beautiful in my exaggerated ugliness.
It's like, yeah, what Chesterton, he's not saying, okay, like you're still part of this earth, Rich. It's okay. You're just, you also deserve heaven, maybe.
You also can be in your own way. All exaggerations are good.
Chesterton's basically in IG saying, yes, Slay Queen, you're still beautiful. But yeah, that is what he is getting at is the part one and part two, the classical architecture and this Gothic architecture each serve a purpose. They know why they're there.
Yes, but they are intentional in their art. That it is maybe different styles. It is they are both have the same intention, and they're both pointed toward the same idea and goal, even if they are completely different aims or starting points from it.
And if you're wondering what art movement happened between classical and this Gothic, nothing, obviously.
Nothing. No, there was absolutely none.
No,
There's
it's
other
part one and part two. That's
there actually are a bunch of different stages,
like thousands, right?
But it's it derails the point of the essay.
Yeah, don't let history get in the way of the point.
To pull Chesterton's words here. All the exaggerations are right if they exaggerate the right thing. This is an exaggeration at the point, trying to make the point.
Do you want to get into part 3? This is the third stage of art.
Part 3. But this great plan was never properly completed. The people had brought up on great wagons the heavy tortoise roof that made the huge decks of stone and all. Sorry, I'll continue on. The people had brought up on great wagons the heavy tortoise roof and the huge necks of stone, and all the 1,001 oddities that made up the unity, the owls and the efts, and the crocodiles and the kangaroos, which, hideous by themselves, might been magnificent if reared in one definite proportion, and dedicated to the sun. For this was Gothic, this was Romantic, this was Christian art. This was the whole advance of Shakespeare upon Sophocles, and that symbol which was to crown it all, the ape upside down, was really Christian, for man is the ape upside down. But the rich, who had grown riotous in the long peace, objected the thing. Obstructed. I do need new glasses here. Oh well. But the rich, who had grown riotous in the long peace, obstructed the thing, and in some squabble, a stone struck the priest on the head, and he lost his memory. He saw piled in front of him frogs and elephants, monkeys and giraffes, toadstools and sharks, all the ugly things of the universe, which he had collected to do honor to God. But he forgot why he had collected them. He could not remember the design or the object. He piled them all wildly into one heap, 50 feet high, and when he had done it, all the rich and influential went into a passion of applause and cried, "This is real art. This is realism. This is things as they really are."
And I think the most important quote and takeaway happens in the first 2 sentences of this last part. Do you want to get right into that, and then we'll talk about it? Okay. What, want me to read this part?
Go ahead.
Okay, this is the last part, and this is probably the most important takeaway. This sentence right here. That, I fancy, is the only one true origin of realism. Realism is simply romanticism that has lost its reason. Again, that's probably the quote takeaway. Realism is simply romanticism that has lost its reason. This is so not merely in the sense of insanity, but of suicide. It has lost its reason. That is its reason for existing. The old Greeks summoned godlike things to worship their god. The medieval Christians summoned all things to worship theirs, dwarfs and pelicans, monkeys and madmen. The modern realists summon all these million creatures to worship their god and then have no god for them to worship. Paganism was in art a pure beauty. That was the dawn. Christianity was a beauty created by controlling a million monsters of ugliness, and that, in my belief, was the zenith and the noon. Modern art and science practically mean having the million monsters and being unable to control them, and I will venture to call that the disruption and the decay. The finest lengths of the Elgin marbles consist of splendid horses going to the temple of a virgin. Christianity, with its gargoyles and grotesques, really amounted to saying this, that a donkey could go before all the horses of the world when it was really going to the temple. Romance means a holy donkey going to the temple. Realism means a lost donkey going nowhere. The fragments of futile journalism or fleeting impression which are here collected are very like the wrecks and riven blocks that were piled in a heap round my imaginary priest of the sun. They are very like that gray and gaping head of stone that I found overgrown with the grass. Yet I will venture to make even of these trivial fragments the high boast that I am a medievalist and not a modern. That is, I really have a notion of why I have collected all the nonsensical things there are. I have not the patience nor perhaps the constructive intelligence to state the connecting link between all these chaotic papers, but it could be stated. This row of shapeless and ungainly monsters, which I now set before the reader, does not consist of separate idols cut out capriciously in lonely valleys or various islands. These monsters are meant for the gargoyles of a definite cathedral. I have to carve the gargoyles because I can carve nothing else. I leave to others the angels and the arches and the spires, but I am very sure of the style of the architecture and of the consecration of the church. Okay. Now, a couple big quotes from there. I really, obviously repeating again, realism is simply romanticism that has lost its reason. And then his examples there where he says that romance means a holy donkey going to a temple. Realism means a lost donkey going nowhere. And so this concludes his essay and his point where he's talking about these three stages of art and his pushback toward this something being real or realistic, yet it seems lost. What is the purpose of this realistic architecture? What do you think he's getting at there? Where is this frustration coming from? Especially, he wrote, this is 1910. So if we're talking modern, by the way, we're talking modern in the sense of early 1900s, not 2000s.
Yes.
I'm sure he'd be totally okay with the square blocks we have in modern art now. He would have nothing to say about that. Yeah.
There's a note here from the part 2 of it that I think is important. The idea that all the exaggerations are right if they exaggerate the right thing. I think this can be a lot more subtle than maybe you could see it on face value, but in both the classic art of trying to appeal to divinity, trying to be as close to quote unquote perfection that there is, however you define that, is an exaggeration. It's an exaggeration of beauty, trying to take the ideal form of whatever you're trying to depict. It is supposed to be more than real, more than our material plane. That's the attempt. And the same thing with the Gothic is going the opposite direction of taking the ugly and trying to make it extreme, trying to go like not just make a man, but make it an ape, make it, more grotesque, but it's still trying to, the idea that we are but mere apes, and take that grotesque to extreme. That does seem kind of to be the point of art, is what point is there to actually just equally reflect reality? There doesn't seem to be much of a reason. One of my favorite paintings is it's an English painting called The Hay Wain. And on the surface, it is a fairly realistic looking painting. Like it's not Salvador Dali or anything. It's not super impressed. It's not that. It is just the painting of a hay wain in the countryside. That's what it is. But the extreme that it is trying to show is the artist was trying to show an extreme of the idealistic countryside before the Industrial Revolution. The artist was heavily against the continued Industrial Revolution in England, especially little details in the painting of smoke in the background beyond the city, and that this is the ideal. This is the extreme, that the sky should be pure, the land should be open, and the machines kind of clouds it. So it is an extreme. It is trying to show an extreme of this, even though the painting on itself can look realistic. I think that is kind of the point of art, when the direction is just about realism. It makes it kind of pointless. It's the same thing I find with a lot of statues, that I don't see much of a point of trying to make a statue realistic. There's something wrong. And I've noticed that a lot with modern statues of people where the people look normal or look how they kind of are from a photo. I could look at a photo and look at the statue and go like, yeah, it's them. Rather than to some degree trying to make an extreme of them, trying to go one direction or the other, trying to make them look more heroic or more grotesque or like something.
Well, then what the hell is Michelangelo thinking by accurately making David's that like if you want to exaggerate,
It's the ideal form.
well, the thing
you
is, why
don't
is he,
want to
why
admit.
is don't make it shrink. What are you doing, Michelangelo? Like, come on, go into Chesterton thoughts of like, just give him a big, like, how mean is that for eternity? We now imagine David, but I get what you mean of how much did you focus on just making this exactly as realistic? Now, do you take Chesterton's point of he's writing this in 1910. I was checking on my computer just to double check, like the Impressionism movement, 1860s and 1900s. So that was Monet and those Impressionists, which for those listening, Impressionism is playing around. Okay, I'm sorry, my art history teacher who was teaching me this, but it's the kind of art that isn't realistic. It's an impression of a scene, and I forget exactly how the techniques do it, but Monet has some cool paintings that do what you're saying essentially of it's not trying to be realistic, it's an impression of a beach or something like that from a different point of view. Could you explain it better than I could, because I always looked at yeah, go ahead.
I can't, but to specifically Impressionism, I think Chesterton would not like it, because it's, in a way, it is trying to make the mundane the, odd. What is it? What is that? What is the impression of a beach? Like that, it is a beach. Like, you're not actually trying to speak of anything higher. I think specifically Chesterton would say it is not as good as maybe the Gothic or the Classic of trying to reach toward divinity. I mean, him being a Christian as well. That, I think, is the point of like, what is the aim of your art? So when I'm talking about the Haywain, it's the idea of the aim being about the beauty of nature and like, what is your point? What is the aim? What's the aim of Impressionist art? I imagine some of it would be towards something greater than oneself, or greater than just the image on the page, not just a style. Because I think is what he's getting at, is when he's talking about modern art being all of the animals piled together, he's talking about just all the different styles. Like, yes, it's there. Like, yes, there's many different styles. There's ways to do it, but it's all grounded in just what is, rather than like, what's the point? What's the aim? So to him, any art that doesn't reach toward the divine, doesn't have an aim toward anything greater than the mortal coil, is less than.
It almost seems like Chesterton here is taking what you do in philosophy of, hey, nihilism, basically what's the aim of nihilism versus what's the aim of having some sort of divinity of, is there purpose in life? Well, you could be an existentialist and say existence before essence. You make, meaning is what you make of it. I think Chesterton is bringing this into art and saying, hey, without God, Nietzsche, if God is dead, then what do you replace it with? And he's kind of making that point of art. Well, if it's not reaching toward, he's a Christian, of course, so a Catholic. So if you're not reaching toward this, then what are we left with? We're left with what kind of depictions of what are you reaching for? What is your point? And he's also asking, he's basically taking that into his metaphor here about mentioning the donkey of, well, in this case, is realism just a lost donkey going nowhere? You could just take that into the nihilistic point. Well, are you just a lost human going nowhere?
Yeah.
Right. Do you kind of get that point where I think that's where his head is at? Because I obviously, he's not a nihilist. So
yeah. I don't know if I don't know if we would even agree on a lot of different value in art, really. But I think the overall point is true, even if you may not agree with his position on art. Specifically, if you're not Christian or you're not even religious, it's the idea of substance over style. That there's many different styles of art, but that is wholly unequal to the substance of art. And if you believe, like, at the very least, I believe that art is the expression of one's soul. You put the reason why humans love art is, I think it is a connection of one soul to another, and that expression between each other. where it feels hollow and flattens when there isn't that. And so I think the art that is solely style over substance lacks that soul they need. So that's what I found really interesting about it. But do you happen to agree with Chesterton in this sense, or do you disagree with him?
So the things that he enlightened me toward was that I'd never thought of Gothic architecture like that before. And so his general point he's making, now I can comprehend of, I'm going to look into some Gothic architecture after this and see like how did that movement start and everything. But I really like the way he put this. I agree with like what is your expression? I think the expression is one of the key words in art of what are you expressing in this art form, whether it is impressionism, some sort of modern art, or this. It could explain some of the times why I don't like a piece of art. So, for example, if it's brutalism, some brutalism architecture, because some of the purpose of some art, we don't have to get into exactly brutalism, but some art, is it just functionality? Is it that an office space? It's function. So when I look at an office chairs and just space, I don't consider that beautiful. At least there could be a way to make it be. Oh, go ahead.
You know what's tragic anecdote?
Yeah, go ahead.
The creator of the cubicle actually did not design it in the way that it is currently used.
That's sad.
He made it to be more open concept plan of like, hey, it can fit any different type of style of office and it can open up for creative spaces. And you look at the actual creator of the cubicle idea and the kind of dividing walls, and it has pretty well aesthetically pleasing ideas. And he actually lamented and expressed his discontent with how it was used, and that businesses used cubicles to just most efficiently pack as many people into the smallest space possible. And but they used his idea to like the opposite of what he wanted. But so you don't blame the man who invented the cubicle space. Blame the corporations that actually utilized it to make it soulless death traps.
I am of the opinion that if you just put a few cool statues, work productivity goes up 10% per statue.
Yeah.
Your environment means a lot of how you're feeling and your work ethic. If you're walking into a spot and just you don't feel inspired around you, it's going to affect you.
Aesthetics matter.
Aesthetics do matter. If you're walking into a cathedral and you hear an echo and again, not religious. I was religious, and we love reading this kind of stuff because it's like we
find it interesting.
Interesting, and it's also, hey, will I be religious again? Maybe Chesterton will convince me. Hopefully,
hey, if anybody can do it,
it's this
Chesterton
guy.
Should be the guy. I would hope.
But when we go into a cathedral, and you just feel as if you're a part of this great experience and atmosphere, and as it's something greater than your personal greater yourself, you feel as if you're in a community, and any type of religious architecture like that, you feel it. And then when you walk into one of those modern McDonald's and you go, what the hell happened? I liked when you just had like dirty ball pits over there and the M, and it felt like McDonald's. And now what are you doing with this sleek design? Stop. Get the sleek out of here.
Sleek, modern minimalism bullshit.
Get me back to
Cracker Barrel turning the ship around, thankfully. Cracker Barrel just bridging the divide of everyone in our nation. Everyone hates it. We can all come together. That Cracker Barrel's new logo and design was awful. No one liked it. It was terrible. It was minimalist. It was modern. It was new. It was sleek. It was gray and drab. Ugh. No personality. No effort. Lacking the history, lacking the charm, the identity, the soul. It's necessary. But
why do you think we have not changed our intro to this podcast? It's the soul.
It's the history.
It's important to us. Okay, we're not going to just plaster a new intro. That's like, ooh, we
hire people to make it like?
Listen, we have the equipment. We could re-sing it, and it would sound better. We could get it perfect. But no, that is why it's beautiful. It's historic to us. It's meaningful to us.
Yeah.
And so when you listen to it and go, oh, let me skip this 10 seconds, think again. No, suffer through that bad arts, okay? Because eventually we will Stockholm people into liking that intro.
Yeah.
But I digress. Okay, so to his point, I agree to a point. I think there is modern art's a wide label to put on things of like, what do you mean by modern art, right? What do you mean by what? Because there's so many different artistic movements. I get his point. I agree with the general point, but there's plenty of art from his day to now that is stunning. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Millions of pieces of art. All the art that we pretty much know in our life was created since Chesterton was alive. That we've interacted with, whether that's stories or paintings, whatever. So what about you? What about his point on that? Do you take it completely? Do you think that there's a bit of nostalgia as well? Because we're talking the nostalgia of our intro song, the da 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 da. Do you think there's a bit of nostalgia Chesterton had of seeing these new movements and liking the feeling that there was more meaning in the Gothic and the classical and seeing things change so fast in the turn of the 19th century?
I think that's a very easy criticism that you could have of any individual that says like, modern, like, hear someone say like, modern music is not as good as the music back in my day. It's like, that's
we just said this of the McDonald's. We're like, the McDonald's when we grew up, right?
Yeah, it'd be tale as old as time of, one generation saying the new thing is not as cool as what it was. So completely understand. However, I mean, the fact that Chesterton is referencing not like his generation of art, but like the difference between classic and Gothic, which is certainly well before his time. It's very different from someone saying like, oh yeah, I grew up in the 80s and the 80s music was much better than the 90s and 2000s music. I don't think it's completely the same. And also Chesterton does go into the point of it being like, what is the aim of the art? What it is also trying, the difference between classic and Gothic is attempting to create extremes, going to the extreme rather than trying to be realistic. And that is something I tend to agree with in general. Like if someone says like, oh, this art is beautiful because it is realistic and that's the aim, there's always exceptions, but in general I'd agree. I don't like realistic art. I like extreme art. I want to I see realism every day. Everything out of my eyeballs is real. If I'm going to look at art, I want to see extremes. That's the point. You don't tell a story about nothing, generally. It's about the extremes.
I've read a few of those books now.
Yeah. But in general, there has to be, well, why is this character our main character? Well, because they go through an adventure. They go through something extreme, out of the normal. Like, that is the point. Well, it doesn't seem to be like, you already live in the mundane. Why would you ever try to consume more of it? Like, it seems fairly pointless to me if that's your goal.
To that point, a couple examples are coming to mind, but dialogue in books and movies is not realistic. Realistic dialogue would include a character saying, I actually think that is because people talk with a lot of those filler words and pauses and ums and ahs, all that. That's realistic. Now, it kind of makes me think to where quote unquote realistic, naturalistic dialogue does work, whereas a Tarantino film or, my God, what's the amazing director's name? He did Anora and JC is his initials. I'm gonna look it up. I love his movies. It did Tangerine as well. Oh, the Florida Project. Hold on. It's gotta bug me. Sean. Okay, I'm gonna look it up now.
This is your director, not mine.
And Sean. Sean Baker. Oh, okay, Baker. But like that kind of stuff. That again, it's not complete take what somebody would actually say, but it's a feeling that, oh my goodness, I'm so immersed because it's so real as well.
There's also, I think, a confusion when people talk about realism in art and like realism in stories. Because we'll often say of like, oh, those characters felt real. And, yes, that's kind of true. But probably the better word to use rather than real is they feel alive. Because real is fairly mundane. The real would be them saying their butts and ums. The real would be the insignificance of their lives and all these little things. But I don't think that's exactly what people mean by, oh, that character felt real. I think it's the character felt alive, which I think for a story is extreme. But it goes to that point of like the fact that we tell stories. The extreme in a story is that there's an actual ending and that there's a point. It's why I find I do like grimdark stories, and to some degree the only flaw I see with it, and I've seen it a couple times, is when a grimdark story focuses on trying to be realistic too much, of that the point is realism. Because and at least this is the tendency I see, is endings with a grimdark realistic story is often very unsatisfying, because life is often very unsatisfying. There's no real end. It's just is. And it can often be disappointing. So I think there's value to that extreme. And I liked how Chesterton put it, and it gave me words to express a little bit how I feel about art and stories. Of if your aim is realism, I think that's a false aim, at least.
And the aim should instead be to a purpose.
The aim should be extremes.
An extreme.
Generally, if that's, you should be going for an extreme of some type. Either the gothic or the divine, but all aim toward a purpose. And then we look at that purpose. I mean, that's how do we actually rate books and stories? Is we're always asking ourselves the question of, okay, what did the author intend? What's the author's aim? What is this whole thing pointing
Well, not all
toward?
of us ask that. You know, there's some debates. People don't always love our take on that.
We can hold off for one video.
You said
about
author and intent, and it was right there.
I know.
But
Yes.
I get your point. But what do we say then when we're reviewing a book and we ask ourselves, hey, Project Hail Mary or an Andy Weir book, and your dad, by the way, we talked about this with your dad, and a point could be made of, hey, was this realistic? Because it's a hard science, right? Was this a realistic way to get out of that situation? And that could be a criticism of a book, of a hard science fiction book where they get the science wrong.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, that's unrealistic. What's the issue there?
It's a valid point. However, there is things of like breaking immersion. I think that's more of the issue of if someone knows the actual science and the book is claiming to be scientific, then it breaks immersion. That's the actual problem with it being unscientific and unrealistic. However, if the story itself is just realistic, then there's probably not much of a story. Andy Weir stories of like The Martian and Project Hail Mary are definitely extremes. They have a point. There is, I would challenge anyone to say that The Martian and Project Hail Mary aren't extreme in that sense. Yes, it uses realistic science. It uses that to create a convincing world. But the story is extreme. It's extreme, like extreme about the goodness of humanity, how we can actually come together. The point of Andy Weir's vision of the world being more of unity rather than division is extreme in any sense. I think he may get the science right. I don't know if he gets the humans right often, or societies and how we interact with each other. It's probably the most unrealistic thing about his story.
What about nonfiction?
We try and find the most extreme things in nonfiction. Why? There's some, I guess, value in the mundane, but
nonfiction should. I mean, isn't the point of nonfiction typically to be realistic, or to be? I mean, it's a real story.
Would you find nonfiction art?
Question, yeah.
Or is it just informative?
Last nonfiction book that we read was the Anxious Generation.
Mhm.
of that kind of book, would you consider that art?
Not really. It's informative.
Mm.
But yeah,
And
I don't know if
guess
I would particularly.
what's your definition of art too? Because is it more that expression? Is it skill plus expression equals art?
Generally, yeah. I think it has to express something of the soul with some degree of skill, making a point through alternative means rather than just stating it.
Hmm.
You know, you're trying to make a point without actually saying it outright. It's why people kind of don't like stories that are a little too on the nose often. You know, if your story where your main character is just telling you what the lesson is, you often come across like, why'd you do that? You could have just told me the lesson. Then there's no point of the story. You've ruined the whole reason for this existing. I'm so, like, if you just tell me what your point is, why did I bother reading the story?
It reminds me of that the why fiction and fantasy is so cool. We read Tolkien's essay on fairy stories,
Mhm.
and we also read Le Guin's essay why aren't men reading anymore, something like that, or
Why Americans are
why
afraid of
Americans
dragons?
are afraid of dragons. That's
Yes.
it. Yes, and the end quote of that, which I'll pull that up.
I have that book behind.
Which book?
That.
Oh, her
Yes.
Language of the Night.
Language of the Night is back there if you want to reach.
It'll be quicker to search it up here. We got this quote at the very end of her essay where she says this and Tolkien says similar things. She says, "It is by such statements as 'once upon a time there was a dragon,' or 'in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit.' It is by such beautiful non-facts that we fantastic human beings may arrive in our peculiar fashion at the truth." That kind of this essay is reminiscent of those feelings that we see from Tolkien, from other writers, of where, and Le Guin here, where they're saying that these exaggerations, these in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, or once upon a time there were dragons, these simple non-facts, these non-facts that we may arrive at some sort of truth. And these exaggerations are more truthful. These stories, this fiction is more truthful than anything real that you could ever experience. And I think that's the central point. Why are we so obsessed with fiction and with art? Because it often speaks to some form of reality more so than any of this thing that claims to be realistic.
It's the extreme.
Yeah.
So if you learned anything, I think Chesterton wants, if you're writing something, if you're making something, don't be satisfied with it being realistic. Aim for the extreme. Aim for greater than real. But yeah, if you liked us talking about this kind of stuff today, let us know down in the comments. Let us know if you think differently than us. Love to hear from you all. And we'll catch you guys in the next one.
A 3, a 2, a 1. Da,
Bye,
da, 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 da. Bye all.
Bye, everyone.